the pineal gland. Descartes called it the seat of the soul, you know? It sits behind the eyes, and it's always looking, is it daylight or is it darkness? Because it makes melatonin. But that's like one of the first things we know that it makes. But also, anytime you increase your intrathecal pressure, like if you were lifting weights, you're increasing intrathecals, like inside your body, that pressure. So any kind of pranayama, the technique, or even the yogic techniques, you're increasing intrathecal pressure. The pineal gland itself has little calcite crystals, and it's like an antenna of the cosmic radiation, but it's like a transducer where it can actually, creates what's called a piezoelectric effect, where if you increase the intrathecal pressure, then the energy in your body moves up and it stimulates that gland, and then the gland can make melatonin. But then there's other metabolites of melatonin that can give higher states of consciousness. Melatonin can be converted into kind of like a Valium type supplement that makes you feel real calm. And if you continue to convert it, it turns into that DNT, which is conducive to higher states of consciousness.
So today's episode is about the unfortunate chronic health epidemic that humanity faces today. We have illnesses ranging from autoimmunity to chronic fatigue syndrome and many more. And perhaps the reasons for these illnesses is not so mysterious. We have pollution, we have pesticides in our food, we have conflict within ourselves and also with other humans and beings on this planet. In my own journey, when I became disillusioned with Western medicine, I became more open to traditional healing systems. And that's when I came across a legendary healer, the late Vaidya Mishra, who comes from a lineage that's 5,000 years old from India. And today's guest, Dr. Marianne Teitelbaum, is a student of Vaidya. She runs a rigorous practice in New Jersey, and she's also the author of a phenomenal book known as Healing the Thyroid with Ayurveda. And so in this episode, we talk about how to treat autoimmunity, what is the effect of pharmaceuticals on our bodies, and also we talk about the master hormone, the pineal gland, also known as the seat of the soul. So I hope that you'll tune into this conversation, and if you like it, please share it with your friends, especially someone who's dealing with chronic illness. So first of all, thank you, Dr. Teitelbaum, for being here. You are a chiropractor, an Ayurvedic practitioner. You have a very alive practice in New Jersey and all over the world, because I am in California and I've consulted with you over the phone. And one of the teachers that you have received a lot from is Vaidya Mishra. And I was wondering if you could share your connection with him, how you met him, and what it is that you think that this particular lineage has brought forth into the world.
Well, his lineage dates back 5,000 years. They treated Lord Krishna's son for leprosy, and they always had a very divine lineage. They were considered Raj Vaidyas. Raj means they're the doctor to the royalty of India, which, there's hundreds of thousands of Ayurvedic physicians in India, and they're all vying to be, the royalty of India's doctor. And his family always was. His grandfather had a spa, and a lot of the recipes that he brought to us were from the spa, and from he grew up. He went to Ayurvedic college, but when he came back, he sat for 7 years with his father so he could get that clinical experience studying with someone who already had a lifetime of knowledge that he could give to him, which he got from his father, and that's how lineages are. And they always say it's best to study with a Vaidya who has a lineage like that, because in school, you can read about the herbs, Bhumi Amla does this thing, or, Amalaki does that thing. But you can't get a feel really for what it does unless you sit with someone and you get to see firsthand that this person has food allergies and they're allergic to gluten and dairy. And when you put them on Bhumi Amla, it helps the liver so much that the food allergy goes away. See, that kind of knowledge you won't glean from the books. So that's why, for me, I was very fortunate to have sat with him for 20 years. And the way it all came about was that I was one of the first Ayurvedic physicians in the United States in the very early 1980s. That's when the first wave of Ayurvedic doctors came to train us, and I started training. And a lot of it was through Maharishi Ayurveda. Maharishi Mahesh Yogi is responsible for bringing a lot of Ayurveda to the West and yoga and meditation techniques. He really popularized him along with Deepak Chopra, who he trained, and then Deepak Chopra brought Ayurveda. Deepak Chopra asked my teacher if he would work with him, and my teacher said he wanted to do more specific work. So what he did, he came to America and made formulations for Maharishi Ayurvedic Products International, which was one of Maharishi's kind of sub-companies to make Ayurvedic products. At that time, they knew that I was really using a lot of Ayurveda, and they asked him if he would train me a little bit over the phone if I had questions. So I would do that. And at one point, I reached a time where he said to me, your knowledge is too advanced now, and I can't do this over the phone. I have to come in person. And I just thought, well, the company's not going to give up their, he was their best Vaidya. He made the best formulas, and the company was thriving under the formulas he was making. And he was working so many hours, and I thought that'll never happen, but I thought that was nice of him to offer. And the next thing you know, I got a call from the company, and they agreed to send him out. And that was the beginning of our relationship together. He would come out, train me, and then go back, make his formulas. And at some point, he broke off with MAPI for many reasons, one of which was he could see that using crude herbs wasn't going to work here in America or in the Western world because we had too many pharmaceuticals going through the liver, too much bad food, processed food, and that the liver was so corrupted now that it wouldn't even be able to digest the herbs. Just in the same way, you could see so many people can't even digest food anymore. Just about every day, every other new patient will tell me they're allergic to gluten, they're allergic to dairy, tree nuts, and they go through this long laundry list of foods they're sensitive to. And it's not so much that these foods are creating their illness, it's that their liver is taking those foods and instead of processing them the way it's supposed to, it's having what Vijay Mishra called a temper tantrum on the food. That is, you swallow the food and the liver corrupts it and turns it into what we call amavisha. Visha is a poison. It's highly reactive. And there's 4 types of toxins. Of those 4, 2 of them we call autoimmune toxins. So one is amavisha. That means the food on the inside, as it's going through the digestive tract, is no longer digesting well. We call it a food sensitivity or a food allergy. Every time I eat gluten, I get this. Every time I have dairy, I get that. But in reality, it's the liver turning that food into amavisha, into poison. From the outside world, we have another visha, another poison called garvisha. Gar is slow. So this is like a slow toxin. So these are all those 80,000 chemicals we've surrounded ourselves with in skincare products, pesticides, air pollution, the water's polluted. Everywhere we turn, there's chemicals. And then what we're trying to heal ourselves with, the pharmaceuticals from modern medicine, they're the most toxic, and we're trying to heal ourselves with that. So it's a combination of too many chemicals coming into the body. And the ancient doctors of India said if toxins get in the bone marrow, that also isn't good because that's where the immune system cells are born. So every day when you step outside, you're breathing in air pollution. It goes right in the bone marrow. If you ever had a vaccine, and you can see there's about 40 vaccines on the market now, that the chemicals go right into the bone marrow. If you look at the public health records of the United States, before there were any vaccines, there were hardly any autoimmune diseases. The first one that came out, you saw an uptick in autoimmune, and then more came out. And then by the 1970s, there were about 10 or 11. We were starting to see more. But then in 1989, the vaccine schedule went up to 35 vaccines. 35 vaccines for a child. And some of them you have to get 2 and 3 times. So now we're talking dozens of vaccines. Now that's when everything broke loose. We see so much autoimmune and Hashimoto's, and the children have all these allergies and tree nut allergies, and they EpiPens they have to carry to school, asthma, eczema. If these autoimmune toxins go in the lungs, it's called asthma. If they decide the skin, the largest organ in the body, is going to let them out, now when it comes through the skin, it forms rashes like eczema, and which is what we see in the children: food allergies, asthma, eczema, let alone all other things, autism. So we're living at a very difficult time in the history of mankind where when you go to a doctor, they can harm you. So now we're seeing such a prevalence of autoimmune, and it's difficult to fix if you're just using herbs because the herbs, many are heating. You try to take ashwagandha, you're going to get worse. I can guarantee it. I have 6 bottles of ashwagandha tablets that have been sitting on my shelves. I'm going to have to throw them out because I haven't been able to use them for the last 4 years. They're beyond their expiration date because it's such a hot herb. If your liver's already hot and you have autoimmune and you swallow ashwagandha, it's going to make you worse. Or shilajit, or many of the herbs for the liver, or guggulu, and many of the Ayurvedic herbs in general. Then, to make matters worse, even the ones that are cooling, if you take them, your liver is going to have a temper tantrum on them and turn them into amavisha, the same way it's turning the food into amavisha. So this is what we were up against in the early years when Vijay Mishra sat with me. He was trying to teach me how to use the herbs and we couldn't use them. He was trying to teach me how to take the patients through detox and we couldn't do it until finally he developed these 2 ways to get the herbs into the patients that kept the liver out of the picture, where he figured out how to extract just they call it the prabhava in Ayurveda. It's just the essence of what that herb can do, the intelligence of that herb without all the crude herb that the liver has to process. And then we were able to treat everything. So now that's why I have a very busy practice. 2/3 of it, if not more, are food allergies, autoimmune, and all these common diseases you're hearing about.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. So this idea of the prabhava, which is sort of very unique, is somewhat seems similar to the homeopathic idea as well.
Yeah, it is. It's very similar. Yeah.
So in your practices, you're saying that 2/3 of your patients have these problems of autoimmunity and food allergies over the years in the last 2 decades of your practice, or maybe longer. Are you seeing that it's going up, or is there any particular form of it that's happening more now than 20 years ago?
Yeah, I'm glad that I've been in practice this long, and it's actually almost 40 years.
Hmm.
Before 1989, we didn't see that much, and even before then, like I opened my practice in the 1980s, we didn't see that much autoimmune, and now it's just getting worse. And as more vaccines come out, we're getting sicker and sicker as a culture. But it's hard to turn this tide of the pharmacological companies because they're doing what they think is the best. They think this is great. We give these vaccines, you won't get the disease, but they don't realize the side effects yet. I'm thinking someday they will. Now, for example, early on, we could see that people getting the flu shots, in the early years, the shots had mercury in them, which that's like the most deadly compound next to arsenic. And so we were all being injected with this mercury. And then they thought, yeah, we better not do that anymore. So around 2006, they took the mercury out of the shots, except for the flu shot. So I make it a point to ask every single new patient that I see how many flu shots they've had. Just today, I've had a few new patients. They'll say 20 or 30 because they get them every year. What
Hmm.
I saw when you're in clinical practice, you start to see patterns emerge. So one of the patterns I saw was that the more flu shots that person had, they had a tendency to get these demyelinating diseases, they're called. See, mercury can burn the myelin sheath. So you have a nerve. The nerve is made of fat, and there's a sheath covering it called the myelin sheath, which is also made of fat. These toxins that we're surrounding ourselves with, they have an affinity for fat, just like in the ocean. The fish have mercury because they have a lot of fat, it gets stored in their fat tissue. So when these chemicals come into us, they go directly to the fat tissue. One of which, depends on where they're going to go. If it goes in the brain, you get this disease. If it goes here, the bone marrow, you get autoimmune. But if it lands on your myelin sheath, it can burn holes in it. That is otherwise known as multiple sclerosis, or MS. So I saw this great correlation. The more flu shots someone got, they got MS. But I had to keep it to myself because if you try to give that kind of knowledge out, people don't want to hear it. Having said that, I see a little ray of hope. I live next to the University of Pennsylvania, one of the greatest medical institutions in the whole country. They have a neurology section, which is outstanding. I had a patient call me one day. Her sister went there. She was diagnosed with MS, and they told her it was from her flu shots. To me, this great load was lifted off my shoulders because Vijay Mishra and I could see, you can feel it in a person's pulse, all that mercury. You can feel it because you can feel the nerve tissue, and you could feel the mercury burning the nerve tissue. We were seeing it clinically and in the pulse, and we had no one to tell because no one will listen because we're just Vajays or chiropractors. But here now we have modern medicine saying, wait, we're seeing a correlation that mercury burns nerve tissue. And so now we have the great medical institutions seeing it first. And it's just a matter of time before it filters down to the greater society. It'll take some time.
Yeah, yeah, such a deep terrain. Several ways we could go, but one of the things that you highlighted is this, I would feel a revolution of Ayurveda, at least in our time. I'm surprised I'm here in California now, and the normal hospital system now has Ayurvedic practitioners embedded within. And I see an Ayurvedic practitioner, and the other doctor also walks in the consult, and both of them are consulting together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really is a ray of hope. And yeah, this thing with the vaccines is and medicines, as you were saying, the impact on the liver. Even a decade ago, when I was embedded in academia, if you just see any ad of any medicine, right? If you see it all the way through, once they start telling you at the end, fast in, this speeded up 10x, if you just listen to the reactions, potential reactions of that medicine, why would anybody want to take that? And that's the case with several of the medicines, very popular, that are prescribed, like for cholesterol and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes me wonder how the FDA can even approve them. Like my niece, her teacher was about 39 years old. She had psoriasis, which we love to treat that in Ayurveda. We have a very high successful rate treating it. So she took a medication to shut her immune system down so the psoriasis would go away because that's also autoimmune. And that's pretty much what modern medicine has to offer. Let's just shut your immune system off. And so when she got the flu, she died because she had no immune system to fight it. And she was only 39. The flu is something maybe the elderly can't fight because their immunity's weak. So her life was shortened by decades just from taking that. And so we have to think of other ways, to treat these things than putting a Band-Aid on and just shutting your immune system off like that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. When I had my resurgence of not resurgence, but when I got the autoimmune stuff, I had one of the things I had was, of course, rashes, but also inflammation in one of my eyes that developed into a cataract. And because I was embedded in academia and a lot of research hospitals in San Diego, which is the hub of biotech, I just was reading tons of research papers, going to all kinds of doctors, and one of the treatments was indeed to inject with corticosteroids.
Hmm.
And I have friends who are on those. I'm not on those anymore. But even then, when I saw the long-term profile of essentially shutting down your immune system, it's pretty horrible to what it can do to your blood vessels and other systems. And these days, I believe now they're doing immunotherapy, which is a little different than corticosteroids. But I've seen and heard through family members who are on that. It seems better than chemotherapy for certain kinds of cancers and immune disorders. But people are getting strokes because of that or other issues. I saw a big placard, a billboard somewhere while driving where there was these, group of lawyers willing to sue if you had gotten immunotherapy. I'm wondering if you've heard of that.
Well, with every medicine now, it's starting to be where we're seeing the side effects and not just that type of medicine, but I see too different attorneys getting groups of people together who took this medicine or that one. Yeah, it is true. I mean, just the birth control pill alone, um, that's responsible also for strokes in the young girls. It's responsible for breast cancer. It destroys the gut microbiome, food allergies. It can give HPV because once you lose the friendly bacteria in the bladder and the vaginal tract, they're the first line of defense against human papillomavirus and any other And so it increases your risk of getting that, and cervical dysplasia. Every day I treat women who've been on the birth control pill. I have a lot more experience with that because the immunotherapies are fairly new. And but I'm sure, they do have those side effects you're saying. But I see a lot of side effects of people on the birth control pill, the statin drugs, and the medicines for the bones too, because the medicines for the bones, they're putting poison into the bone marrow to kill the osteoclasts. And the osteoclasts break down the bone. So with osteoporosis, they say there's more activity breaking down the bone. We want to build it up more. So why don't we kill the osteoclasts? But you're putting poison in your bone marrow. See, that's dangerous. So luckily we have Ayurveda. We have ways of cleaning the bone marrow. It's nourishing the bones. We're doing the opposite. And by cleaning the bone marrow, the immune system starts to come back. But when you mentioned that, I wanted to point that out, that with autoimmune, you're normally going to see that person has a rash because these hot autoimmune toxins, they're both Amavisha and Garvisha. These two poisons are very hot. When they come through the skin, they cause a rash. So with most autoimmune diseases, you'll see a rash. Many times you'll see problems with the eyes because the eyes are a pitta organ. Light is coming in there, it's heat. So the eyes are also showing you how the liver's doing. So when anyone in the Far East, even Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, if you tell them you have a problem with your eyes, they'll know right away your liver needs a lot of work. And then we give attention to the eyes to cool them down too. But it's
Wonderful.
very common when you said autoimmune, rash, eyes. We always see that complex.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, the vision is 2020 in hindsight when all of this stuff was happening, I couldn't make any sense of that. But as you're saying, it's easy for you to connect it based on Ayurveda. And maybe I know we have many themes we could go into, but since you mentioned statin, I know that there is this tendency, which I don't know if it's still strong in the Western Hemisphere, but fat is considered bad in a way, right? Particularly when you relate it to cholesterol and you have these statins. And I know that in traditional medicine system, be it Ayurveda or Tibetan medicine, that fat, our brain is fat.
Mhm.
And as you were just saying, that the nervous system has this coverings, the myelin
All
covering.
fat. It's all
And
cholesterol.
yeah, so fat, I remember one physician once saying that if you try to get rid of fat, you'll definitely die of heart disease. But
Mm.
if you take ghee and these kind of healthy fats, I can guarantee you will not die of
Yeah.
cardiac disease.
The idea of the cholesterol's clogging our arteries is a very outdated, outmoded, and very irrelevant, very last century. That idea came about in the 1940s also. There was one study done, and back then you can imagine how flawed the studies were. So the doctors kind of attached to that. But there's been so much research through all these decades now. And if you look at it, they should be reading it. First of all, there was a big study done in Japan that took three groups of people and said these have very high cholesterol. This is normal, and then this range is very low. The ones who lived the longest were the very high cholesterol. But see, also back then, they made up this idea that they called the HDLs the good guys and the LDLs the bad guys. So they're very concerned that your LDLs might go up. Again, you can imagine there's several types of LDLs that they've discovered now. That's why I'm saying they should be reading the research. And most of them are very good for you. For example, there's one, it's like a very fluffy kind of LDL, and it protects your arteries. That type of LDL increases when you eat ghee. So I eat a lot of ghee in my diet. My cholesterol is very high, which I'm very grateful for. And my LDLs are very high because of the ghee. But if you study and break it down, this is what the new tests are showing. The newest test is called NMR, where they can see the types of LDLs. That's what you want. You can't just have a blanket statement saying that the LDLs are bad for you. And if you look, you'll see that when you're eating ghee, it's protecting the arteries. My cholesterol was so high, I went and got my arteries tested again at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. And in the middle of the test, they said, "What are you doing? Your arteries are so clean, they're like a baby's." And my cholesterol's through the roof. And because I'm eating ghee. Now, we see a lot of people coming from India, and they'll tell me, "Oh, I don't eat ghee. I know it's cholesterol. They think it's a bad thing. They've been trained to think that cholesterol is a bad thing. And instead, they're eating vegetable oils and they're tempering their spices with groundnut oil, mustard oil, canola oil. When you heat those oils, there's no cholesterol in them. They form a plastic that clogs your arteries. So, in the next breath, these people from India who are vegetarian, fruits, vegetables, grains, lentils, they're telling me they just had stents put in. I think they have so many stents there in India because they're eating the vegetable oils. So I quickly get them off those oils. We have ways of cleaning out the arteries, and then we reintroduce them back to ghee. See, but you have to keep in mind that this is going to take several generations now for us to erase from our memory banks that cholesterol is very important. The hormones that keep us young, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, they're all made of cholesterol. You don't want those to decline rapidly as you age because you'll age quicker. Your brain, I think of it as a big hog. It's eating so much cholesterol every day that you can't possibly eat enough of it in your diet. So to make up for that fat, because the brain is cholesterol and it's eating it too. And the cerebrospinal fluid is bathing the brain like in these fats and oils that your liver has to make up for and make the extra cholesterol for the brain. Now, when the doctors see the cholesterol's high, even though it could be very good from nice ghee or warm milk, they put you on a statin drug, and what it does, it damages the liver so that it can't make the cholesterol, and then the brain's going to suffer. So that's one of the great causes of dementia that we're seeing here in the West. One of a few others, like the flu shot, the mercury, where does it go? In the brain. Now, if you're getting flu shots every year and statin drugs, that's a double whammy. Then you're in pretty big trouble asking for it, to get dementia or Alzheimer's. So it's just an unusual time again where we see doctors and they're harming us sometimes more than they're helping us. Where they do help us, they have excellent tests. The tests that they're doing are amazing. And they're good for crisis care. If you break your leg or you need surgery, the surgical techniques are outstanding. But again, for we're trying to either prevent a disease or take these chronic diseases like autoimmune, whatever they might be. They're not treating those so well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's as you were saying, the ray of hope seems to be increasing in the sense that now we have Ayurvedic practitioners and doctors of osteopathy and not in all institutions, but even energy healers in chemotherapy clinics. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
it's been quite a struggle, I know, for the sort of the mavericks, including people like yourself who have
yeah.
allowed Ayurveda to become a household name in certain parts, definitely in California.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe continuing on this theme, because you mentioned a few times, and I know that you write about this in your book, of the possibility of plants and our connection with plants to clean certain layers of tissue, as you were saying, cholesterol. I know in your book you talked about in relation to the bone marrow, moringa stalks
Hmm.
that can be used to clean that tissue. But what would be, maybe you could respond to that generally, or in terms of cholesterol, if there was something that is available, as just so people know that there is such possibility, because usually it's considered irreversible.
What, plaque?
The plaque, yeah.
Well, let's talk about plaque then. So plaque is where you're eating these vegetable oils. It's like plastic. They're going to coat the lining of the arteries, and then calcium will come on top of it. So it's like this sticky plaque with calcium. So we have ways. We have a food that scrapes the plaque, and we have an herb that breaks down the calcium. See, we have everything. So we have actually ways of cleaning the arteries. The research shows that a statin drug doesn't clean the arteries. All it does is lowers cholesterol. I think they think it will, clean the arteries, but it hasn't shown to be true. Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
So there are certain cases, that's one of them, where we have more to offer a patient than modern medicine does. That and some other diseases, like with the lungs too.
Yeah, and not to take it out of context, because I know that I've learned it maybe through the hard experience that healing often is holistic, and you can't just have a bullet like an herb or a plant and just say I'll pop this in and it'll clean it. It's always multiple factors. But what kind of in that arsenal, holistic arsenal, what food is there or herb that can help with the plaque situation?
Well, again, I don't usually tell the patients because you have to be monitored. So when I talk about cholesterol and I write about, I don't usually mention the herbs. There's a specific lentil. I won't say the name because I don't want people to go out. They wouldn't know how to use it. It grows on the hard, rocky soil in the Himalayan mountains. It itself is hard as rocks. So you can't just cook it. It would take too many hours. So
Yeah.
we have to do things with it. But we have our patients boil water, put it on top of the lentils, drink the water in the morning, do that for 2 more days. Then they cook the lentils on the third day. They do that interspersed with the herb that helps to break down the calcifications in the arteries. And on top of that, we give them transdermal magnesium. See, magnesium, and we get it from nature too. It sits on the outside of every cell in your body, and what it's doing, it's pushing calcium away all day long. We want calcium to go in our teeth and our bones, and that's it. But it likes to infiltrate. So if magnesium were to go low, it'll go and infiltrate areas. One of the areas it loves to go is the inside of the arteries, and they call it hardening of the arteries. So you could feel a person's pulse as they get older. It's very hard. You can feel it. But again, we can reverse it. If you take the pulse of someone in their 20s, it feels like a rubber band because actually it is. Every time the heart beats, there's 2 layers in the walls of the arteries. One of them is a layer, it's like a rubber band. It just expands when the heart beats, and that's why the blood pressure doesn't go up when you're young. Now, that in those 2 layers, the muscular layer and then this rubber band layer, there's magnesium. Just think of your bones. If you just had calcium in the bones, if you drop the bone, it would break like a piece of chalk. It'd be brittle. But when you add magnesium to it, you try to break that chicken bone, it has that pliability to it. So in our arteries, if magnesium goes low, calcium rushes in, those arteries are going to get hard. So we give these herbs to pull that, like magnesium can displace it, and then other herbs, and we clean the arteries. Then that person who's even in their 70s, the pulse feels like someone in their 20s. It's real pliable again. So you can actually see before and after, so that's good.
Yeah,
Um,
that's really incredible. And yeah, thank you for saying that. Actually, I feel like I do know that lentil that you
yeah.
mentioned. And um, it's very it can be pretty hot. And I know from what you're sharing is that it's an alchemical process and that monitoring and careful. I think you're also highlighting this idea behind Ayurveda, which is personal responsibility, where the patient becomes empowered to actually chart the course of their journey. Whereas in the West, maybe it's shifting now, but the idea is I pop this pill, I don't have to change anything else, and miraculously I'm healed. Whereas in Ayurveda, there is tremendous amount of intelligence that's imparted,
Hmm.
which I feel is very empowering to not just heal the illness, which is probably a symptom of being out of harmony in life in general.
Well, as we go through life, different imbalances happen. When we're first young, you don't want anything to interfere with the growth of the gut microbiome. So if you ever took an antibiotic or you had a vaccine, uh, it'll wipe out those strains. So that's one of the first imbalances that happens. Then we might start on some improper food as we get a little older. We might want to get into junk food or bad oils. And these imbalances increase. Then we go through what we call 6 stages of disease process, where we're working our way towards a disease. So in the first 2 stages, different things could be going out of balance, but you won't have any symptoms yet. In the third and fourth stage, you have symptoms, but if you go to a doctor, they'll do tests and they'll say there's nothing wrong with you. So they ignore it because modern medicine doctors are trained to diagnose and treat disease. So I have many patients who fall in this category. They have a lot of symptoms, and that's why I wrote the thyroid book too. They have a lot of thyroid symptoms, and yet the blood work's normal. And the doctors make them feel like there's nothing wrong with them. There's a lot wrong with them. It's just that it hasn't progressed to the 5th and 6th stage yet, where we can now call it a disease. So if someone is diagnosed with anything, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, anything, that's just a fancy name. The real important thing is all these imbalances that have happened since day one, even before when the child was in utero, if the mother's making certain mistakes, while she's pregnant, it starts that legacy of imbalances in the person. So, but what you have to do then, if you take on a patient, you have to see in that particular case, even though they all have the same name, they all have Hashimoto's, they all have it for different reasons. The Hashimoto's name isn't the important thing. It's in that particular person. What did they do wrong? Tell them to stop doing it. And then you got to start fixing those imbalances. So we don't look at it so much as the name of the disease as to what are that person's unique imbalances.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I experienced this firsthand because I had all these symptoms that were pretty serious, like a cataract building in the eye with a lot of uveitis or inflammation and other symptoms, but they could not find anything on the blood test. So I was sort of left with almost no treatment other than trying to put the fire away using corticosteroids. So it's only gradually when I became aware of these deeper healing methodologies that the symptoms actually became important, that it's a good sign that they're not showing up in the blood test, that you can
Yeah, it
take care
means
of
you
them.
have to progress to a point where they can name it. So that it's much easier to reverse. The deeper you go down that path, it gets more and more difficult to reverse. But the fact that you had uveitis, that was a signal right then and there. If we don't fix these imbalances, if we just cover it up with corticosteroids, those imbalances are going to progress to autoimmune. So uveitis is always telling you, up, autoimmune disease is right around the corner. Let's nip that in the bud. Let's look at the liver. Let's look at the gut, like all these things. What's he eating? What time's he going to bed? All these things contribute to autoimmune.
Is the illness of chronic fatigue syndrome part of this mix of autoimmunity as well?
Yeah, it's all what that is. There's all different layers, just like every disease. There's so many layers. They just lump it together and say you're chronically fatigued. So there's a saying from both Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, as well as the ancient seers of India. They said all diseases begin in the gut. I would have to conclude with that. I would also add the gut and the liver, from what I can see. So with the gut, that's balancing the whole immune system. And once, that first antibiotic or that first vaccine kind of sets the stage for autoimmune because you just wiped out the gut microbiome. And unless you know how to regenerate that, it starts this downward spiral towards autoimmune. And if you continue to do things like this, it pushes you deeper into it.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, we could go on and on, but I think this is such powerful information for people. Maybe one more theme or a couple of themes that we're facing in technology, and I see that you've mentioned on your site is the impact of technology on our prana or on our life force. And I know that Vedya Mishra had some solutions to that as well. And also the role of this life force, this prana in all illnesses. You did write in your book that one way to solve these problems is just to have more prana and take more prana in, but it's become hard. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. So there's another saying from the ancient rishis was that all diseases develop from lack of prana to that particular organ or gland. So first of all, I have to educate the patients what prana means. I think they think it's the life breath because you get prana from breathing, but that's only the very beginning. What prana is, it's the vibration from the sun. We call it Agni, it's fire. And the moon, that's Soma, it's more
Mhm.
cooling lunar energy. And then those two, they just sit in the physiology, but to move them, we have Marut. So these energies are coming from the cosmic radiation, the sun, the moon, and they come into the body more at the top of the head. This is a point here. It's a famous, we call it Marma points. Marma points are governing the reception and flow and the distribution of the flow of prana. Kind of like in your house, you have a main entrance of electricity in one big wire. And then you have these outlets, the switches. This switch is for the refrigerator. And in our bodies, we have the same thing. The main flow of prana comes in at the top of the head. It's called the Adipati Marma point. It goes down the spine, and then from the spine, it's delivered to all the organs and glands. Now, it also comes in at the eyes, any orifice in the head, the ears, the left and right nostril. This is the Ida channel. This is the Pingala. Ida and Pingala channel meets in the spine. It's called the Sushumna Nadi. Nadi is just a vibrational channel. It's carrying prana. And even the mouth, so you can breathe it in. So this prana is coming in, and then we need that nice prana to go to the liver and the heart. In fact, the heart, they call it the cosmic pacemaker, the pranic energy. It needs a constant flow. If the flow becomes less, you'll get heartbeat arrhythmias. So in this day and age, we have computers now, cell phone towers, all that radiation, that's in the same element, the space element that the prana is in. That's what prana is. It's space and air, you know. So now the prana coming in at the top of the head, the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth, it's all polluted. So now we have this very polluted prana feeding our organs and glands. So there are ways that where we can purify it as it comes into the body, and ways we can mitigate the effects if we're around computers all day.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I mean, being a yogic practitioner and just a practitioner of these internal energy traditions, as you mentioned, the heart in the yogic system, all the pranas actually merge back into the heart, particularly at the time of the deep sleep. So it's also a center. And maybe to connect with that, I actually interestingly saw a post of yours. I think it was just yesterday on your Facebook page where you post a lot of great information. And it was about the pituitary gland, the calcification of the gland, and you were talking about the yogic exercises, which I'm a big fan of, the pranayamas, the breath control, where the pituitary gets activated and decalcified, because calcification is also a big issue in our time. And I was wondering if you had any, in addition to that, do you want to share something about the importance of this particular gland and how these exercises, what
Yeah,
do you mean by activation?
it's not the pituitary gland, it's the pineal gland.
The pineal, yes, I
Yeah.
apologize. Yes.
So Descartes called it the seat of the soul, you know. So it sits behind the eyes, and it's always looking, is it daylight or is it darkness? Because it makes melatonin. But that's like one of the first things we know that it makes. But also, anytime you increase your intrathecal pressure, like if you were lifting weights, you're increasing intrathecals, like inside your body, that pressure. So any kind of pranayama technique, or even the yogic techniques, you're increasing intrathecal pressure. It pushes the cerebrospinal fluid from the fourth ventricle to the third, and it creates, the pineal gland itself has little calcite crystals, and it's like an antenna of the cosmic radiation, but it's like a transducer where it can actually creates what's called a piezoelectric effect, where if you increase the intrathecal pressure, then the energy in your body moves up and it stimulates that gland, and then the gland can make melatonin. But then there's other metabolites of melatonin that can give higher states of consciousness.
DMT is one of them, I believe.
DMT, that's the last one. Now that'll be my next post, because melatonin can be converted into kind of like a Valium type supplement that makes you feel real calm. And if you continue to convert it, it turns into that DNT, which is conducive to higher states of consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you describe the pineal gland as a transducer of sorts. And even when I was back in my academic days, it's very interesting that the brain is considered like this calculator slash computer that's producing thoughts. And well, now it's obvious to me that that cannot be the case, but it's interesting that there's actually no direct evidence for that. And the idea that the brain is more like a transducer that is bringing more like a radio that's bringing in stuff as an
Yeah.
antenna, as you said. It seems very logical to me, but it's amazing that we live in a culture, particularly in the academic Western circles, where without evidence, this other idea that the brain is a computer has become such a dominant idea. It's almost like a religious dogma.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's always like the discipline that you're in, they're the last to know. In other words, like with modern medicine, they'll be the last to find out that cholesterol is important, or they'll be the last to find out that these vaccines destroy the gut microbiome. See what I'm saying? So I guess if you're in the world of computers, you might be the last to find out that the brain is separate from consciousness, and what we're developing in the seed of every one of our cells is just a seed form. It's the seed to enlightenment. It's not just in the brain, it's not in the mind. In fact, many of the meditative techniques are trying to settle the mind, get the mind out of the picture, so that these mantras and vibrations can, like the seed mantras, they're called, so they can grow that seed of enlightenment in the person by getting the mind out of the picture.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think these sort of subtle therapies have been a big part of my healing. And I just love them. And I know that Vedya Mishra actually had um, mantras specifically for the organs or sound vibrations that you could chant to connect with the particular organs. And I actually got that set recently
Mhm.
from their website. But I was wondering if that is a dimension of this particular lineage of Ayurveda that you prescribe to people, or have you found them to be useful?
Yeah, everything. We give patients layers of things to do, and we take each person individually. I might have some religious groups that aren't interested in mantras, so I'm not going to let them know to do this liver mantra or something. But it depends on each person which way I might want to take them, or what way they're dictating they want to go. But yeah, we have so many therapies to offer. But
Mhm.
always development of consciousness is always at the seat of Ayurveda as well.
Great, great. And I know that in your book, one of the unique things I found was that you started with the thyroid and then you connected that with the gallbladder and the liver, and several other organs, which is great, which just points that these, often in Western medicine, we find an organ or like it's the eye or it's something else, and you become so specific, zoned in, zoom into that, to the isolation of everything else.
Not good. Yeah.
And to connect it perhaps to the immune system, there is this idea in Ayurveda called the ojas, right? And because we were talking about vaccines and immune system and its connection to liver, I was wondering if you would like to enlighten us if there is something that you haven't highlighted about how the ojas, the liver, the thyroid, the gallbladder, if there is a cohesive way to, or insightful way to look at them um, as this, overarching way to look at immunity.
Yeah, so if you read my book on the thyroid, it's a book about all of Ayurveda, because the thyroid is a symptom that none of these other things are working well. So we can't in isolation say, oh, you have a thyroid problem. Here, take the thyroid hormone. That's what happens every day in modern medicine. That, again, is an outmoded, irrelevant, and very last century way of looking at how the body works. What I was trying to show in my book, let's say your hair is falling out, you're gaining weight, your hands and feet are cold, you're depressed, you're crying for no reason, and you might suspect you have a thyroid problem. So either you go to the doctor and they'll do blood work and they'll say, no, nothing's wrong with it. They send you home and you cry all the way home because no one's going to help you and you have all these symptoms. Or they might say, oh, yeah, here, your thyroid hormones are low. Here's the hormone. That's the last thing you want to ever do, because now the body says, okay, I have all these reasons why I'm weak. No one's looking at them, but I don't have to make that hormone anymore because you're going to take it. Then they do blood work. And of course, the blood work looks okay because you're on the hormone. They actually didn't do anything. So, what I say in the book, let's look at all the influences on the thyroid, which are everything. And that's true for every disease. So, if we take the thyroid, you make the thyroid hormone, it can't get into the inside of the cell, it sits on the outside. Your liver has to process it to take it in. And it's not till it gets to the inside of the cell where it can do its job. If your liver's not working well, that's not going to happen. Also, so 80% of that happens from the liver, 20% happens from the gut microbiome. That's why I say the gut and the liver are controlling everything. So if you can't process your thyroid hormones, the answer is fix that so you can. The answer isn't to take thyroid hormone. The other thing is, and this is true with the pineal gland, we have a large epidemic of thyroid problems in this country because we put fluoride in the water. We are one of less than a handful of countries who puts fluoride in the water. I cannot begin to tell you how dangerous that is. I have a video on my website. If you look at my links, there's one link that says videos. And I put a link in there, or a video I made. What happens if you drink water with fluoride in it? Well, it calcifies the pineal gland. It can no longer pick up the antenna. That's dangerous. And we're seeing that now. It's like 60% higher than it used to be just a few decades ago, since we put fluoride in the water. The other thing fluoride does, it depresses the thyroid gland. If you get flu shots, they have mercury in them. That mercury, the thyroid's the only gland that uses iodine to make its hormones. So whenever any iodine comes in, the thyroid gets it and it makes its hormones with it. When mercury comes in, it looks a lot like iodine in the periodic chart, and it prefers the mercury over the iodine. So it sucks up the mercury, and now it can't work. If you go to bed past 10, the thyroid can't work. If you're rushing all day long, we call it too much vata, and you have a stressful job or you have a lot of stress in your life, that depresses the thyroid. The thyroid's like a very delicate little princess. Every little thing, she just kind of keels over. So to say, oh, you have a thyroid problem, here's the hormone, that's very outdated. And that's actually, we could take that model and apply it to any disease. That's how they're treating them. Oh, you have a rash? Here, put cortisone cream on it. The cortisone cream stops the detox process of the skin. The rash goes away because you just push the toxins deeper. Now they were trying to come out. You were lucky they were coming out. When you push them back in, you're going to get cancer or something worse now. So most of modern medicine is treating things incorrectly. But as far as OJIS goes, you were mentioning like chronic fatigue syndrome. What that is, first thing you have to look at is the gut and the liver, because every time you swallow food, the friendly bacteria in the gut have to break it down into very small particles so you can absorb it into the bloodstream, and the liver has to process it. So if neither one of those are working, which they're not, and 99.9% of the public that I see, then the food only partially breaks down. It forms ama, a residue stuck there. That rots and ferments, turns into amavisha, and starts to fuel autoimmune. But now you have less food absorbing into the bloodstream. Now, once the food's in the bloodstream, you're going to nourish 7 tissues, starting with the blood plasma. The food stays there 3 to 5 days, and it moves on to the next, the blood, then the muscle, and always 3 to 5 days in each tissue. In between each tissue, there's a little digestive fire called the Dhatu Agnis. These are called the 7 Dhatus, the 7 tissues: blood plasma, blood, muscle, fat, nerve, bone marrow, reproductive fluids. Those are the 7 tissues in the body that need nourishment. So in between, each one is transforming into the next with this little Dhatu Agni, a little tissue Agni that transforms this tissue into the next. But also, that Agni in there is making a little bit of OJIS. I'll explain what OJIS is. At the end of the 7th tissue, you make OJIS. OJIS gives you great strength and stamina, good immunity to diseases. It's your neurotransmitters and hormones. See, so if you feel like you're lacking in strength, that means your OJIS is low. So that means let's start at the very beginning. Are you digesting well? And then also, what are you eating? The other thing is, whatever food you eat, since it spends 3 to 5 days in each of the 7 tissues, you can't make OJIS till about a month from now. The only exception to that is milk. Now, we're not just talking about any milk. You have to get good quality A2, non-homogenized from grass-fed cows, and you have to boil it. If you drink it cold, it makes ama and it stops right there. It never gets in the tissues. It just clogs up the channels and you feel congested, which most people do. So you have to seek out the good milk. Then most people can't digest it anymore because of the devastation to the gut and the liver from all the pharmaceuticals. So we have to fix that. But one of the big goals in Ayurveda is to fix the patient so that they can tolerate the milk, because milk is the only food, if you take it in the correct way, you boil it, drink it on an empty stomach, it makes OJIS today. So when I have all our patients with chronic fatigue syndrome, we have to sort all these layers out, the gut, the liver, what they're eating, get them to the point where they can have milk. All this could take 2 or 3 years. In the end, if we can fix all that and get them to have the good milk, they can make OJIS, and then they're well on their way. The chronic fatigue syndrome goes away. See? That's
Yeah.
why it's a syndrome. It's many things. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. In a way, it is overwhelming, and in another way, it's extremely empowering because it shows you, how to step by step move towards healing. And as you were mentioning about OJAs as being uh, neurotransmitters, and also it seems like if you could just get the OJAs, that's the fastest way to healing. But the problem is you can't. First of all, it takes a long time, and if your digestion is not working, then you can't sort of get there. And you're also indicating about the milk, which is a huge topic. In one way, we can look at the A2 milk or the other milks are better. They don't have the antibiotics, they don't have the hormones. But the other way to look at it is, which I think is the common sense way, is, look at what we're doing to our environment, to other beings who share the space with us. And if we're violent to them and don't treat them with respect, then that circle is connected back to our own illness. So
Yeah.
it's a double, you can look at it both way.
Luckily, we're treating the animals better. People are demanding it, and they're demanding good quality milk. They didn't even know about A2 milk a decade or two ago. Now people want it. So it's a type of protein that's anti-inflammatory. All animal milk, goat's milk, human breast milk, camel's milk, they're all A2 protein. But the cows were genetically modified through the years, so their milk is A1. So a lot of people who think they have lactose intolerances, it's really the protein in the A1 milk they can't digest. And when they get the good A2 milk, they can digest it. But again, you have to know how to take it correctly. These are all the things we have to teach our patients. It's not something they can do overnight.
Yeah.
So you have to fix imbalances. You have to teach them cleanses, teach them the diet, and you can fix digestion. Everyone that we see, that's our starting point. And it takes a little while, but it can be fixed.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I mean, in my own story, I remember that maybe I actually came across A2 milk in your book. And now when I go to Whole Foods, it brings a smile on my face because you have bottles labeled as A2 milk.
Yeah.
And
Now we have our Whole Foods never had any. Then 2 summers ago they had one. Now they have two, and all the other little health food stores have it now too. So it's gaining in popularity. So in that sense, we are moving in the right direction. So
yeah,
yeah.
your book, I don't know if it's been 8 or 9 years, but it was way ahead of the curve. I remember in your book, one place you actually were describing the stores and the places in New Jersey and where to order this A2 milk because it was not available. At least
Yeah,
I have
yeah,
not seen it anywhere.
yeah.
So really thank you I can see the value of that now that it's sort of coming into the mainstream. Um, I have myself become so sensitive to just noticing. I'm sure this kind of phlegm happened with milk, and I make my own almond milk, because I don't know if the almond milk in the stores, if they remove the skin, if it's soaked in water. I doubt that any of that is done. Because in your book, you also talk about when almonds are not peeled and soaked overnight, that there's cyanide in the almond skin, I believe.
Lectins, phytase, they give you leaky gut. That's how all these diseases begin, with leaky gut from that first antibiotic you took or the first vaccine. So yeah, you have to peel the skin. Not only that, if you make the almond milk now, it has more prana. That's what I mean. We have to understand what that word means. If it's sitting on a shelf and leftover, who knows when they made that almond milk? Even if it's organic at Whole Foods, it's lacking the prana. You have to make your own and drink it right away before it starts to oxidize.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. Yeah, this is the beautiful thing about all these ancient healing systems, that the depth of them connects to consciousness, to our spirituality, and it's up to us how deep do we want to go with that.
Mm-mm.
I noticed that even with consuming almond flour and milk, I do get more phlegm, but now I have some ways to, as you said, properly cook it and not take almond flour, filter the milk. and then that it seems to do very well. Maybe sort of to conclude, because you were talking about the pineal and we talked about the prana, and how the pineal is this antenna that also at the material level detects light when we have to go to sleep, when we have to wake up, and so many other things, including DMT, the spirit molecule. Um, I was wondering, you had made a post about the effects of the early morning light, and these days we see a lot of people with blue light blockers. I always cringe when there's blue light because every button on my laptop, on the phone, I don't know why they put blue light always. They could have put red light.
Hmm.
Uh, and so it's connected with a lot of benefits of, receiving the first ray of light and going to bed on time. And I was wondering if you could connect it perhaps with your Pineal post, and also what the inspiration for you was to share that. If there is a cliffhanger that you're about to share about the line of the pineal gland.
Yeah, if you walk when the sun's rising, there's a certain type of blue light. It's going to be different than the blue light in your computers. Any man-made light is different than the cosmic radiation, which is very healing. That at that hour, when that comes in through the pupils, it'll reset your circadian rhythms and let your pineal gland know now it's daylight. And then as the sun goes down, you have to keep your house, the lights dim, because on the inside of your house with computers and uh, artificial lighting, it's the same amount of light as the middle of the day. So you have to somehow keep the lights dim so that the pineal gland knows, oh, now it's darkness. But that's what I was saying. A lot of our patients have lost that rhythm, their circadian rhythm. They can't fall asleep or stay asleep. So we have them go for a walk for a half hour in the morning, and it starts to reset the cycle, especially if they could keep the lights dim at night to let the pineal gland know, oh, the lights are down. Now it's time to make melatonin. You think of it, our ancestors were outside in that light in the morning, and when the sun went down, there were no artificial lights, so they all went to bed early. The fact that we have artificial lighting is a wonderful thing, but it is throwing our rhythms and our connection to nature off. So all we have to do is pay attention to these circadian rhythms, to the hours of daylight and darkness, to eating good food, and then your health will return. But you have to look at all these issues, from the electromagnetic radiation of the computers, smartphones, cell phone towers, smart meters, and the diet, the bedtime. Then everything starts to help you heal. If you skip one of those, it deters the healing process.
Yeah. It's interesting, as you were talking about the cell phones, even in the days when I didn't have any health problems and I was, very happy in my academia. I think this is like 15 years ago. I started to notice that every time I would make a phone call with the cell phone, I would get this headache and a heat around my ear.
Yeah,
And even without knowing that, it happened enough times, maybe a dozen times, that I started to use headset and never actually put the phone to my head.
yeah. Don't ever put it to your head. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And now with every household having smartphones, I sometimes I worry because you can't just tell it to parents when I see little kids putting just the phones, the iPads or the phones on their
I know.
head.
I know.
Uh,
We're
but
doing everything wrong, from the type of milk we drink. We don't, in this country, they think we shouldn't have any milk. It's all plant-based now. And that's another mistake. So we're making lots of mistakes. By the time I see people, every realm, there's a mistake. And we just shift gears and show them the better, and then they start to get better. So,
yes.
mhm.
Well, Dr. Teitelbaum, thank you so much for all of your efforts, and I can see the energy and enthusiasm with which you educate your patients. I'm one of them. And every time I speak to you, there's a vitality in how you go over and over again with each patient the same things.
Yeah, yeah.
So really, I'm so grateful for you continue to share that. Is there a new book on the horizon?
There is, but I haven't told anyone yet. See, when I set out to write the thyroid book, I wanted to write about all the diseases, and the publisher said, just pick one. Because if you write about all of them, if this person has Parkinson's and it's buried in the book, they'll never know it's in the book. So I said, all right, I'll do thyroid, because the vast majority of our patients have thyroid problems. But if you look at the book, I did a smart thing. All of Ayurveda is in there. So I got to write the book I wanted to, because the thyroid is reflecting the health of everything, the liver, the gut, what you're eating, your bedtime, EMFs and all that. So, but now I'm going back and I'm doing that idea where we're going to have, starting with preconception. What do you do if you want to have a baby? Now, if you're not fertile, what do you do? And then when you're fertile, and then you're pregnant, and then in the early childhood years, the teen years, and then the next book will be on the latter stage of life. But I want to show every disease how they're not treating it correctly, just like I did with the thyroid book. So we'll go through the childhood diseases, the diseases of the teen years, and then in the Vata stage of life, Parkinson's, osteoporosis, and I'll show a better way to treat it. Then my work will be done.
Uh, well, I hope that you get a chance to rest, and I'm really looking forward to reading that book and having further conversations with you. And as you were saying, the early times of life, I'm from the area of Kashmir, which is in northern India, or northern India and Pakistan, and I remember that almonds, when I was even a kid, almonds are considered or connected with virility. And I didn't know at the time, but now from our conversation, I have more context as to why it was recommended to eat a lot of almonds before if you were thinking
Yeah,
of
yeah,
conceiving.
yeah. Hmm.
Is there any message that you would like to give or something that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered the basics: prana, ojas, diet, autoimmune. Yep, these are the modern topics that need to be addressed. Cholesterol.
Yes, I mean it's amazing. They are the basics, but I feel like in my own healing journey and with this busy life, that is what I feel like the reminder is to keep returning to the basic because it makes everything so simple.
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time.